Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. My man, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing well, Yariv. Middle of the week here, and we have a lot of
Oh,
Flyers-related news to touch on.
yeah.
Ivan Provorov, as you all know, has been traded, and we're gonna, break it down and get into everything and provide the analysis. And one thing before we start off, it's crazy that Daniel Briere has kind of gone against that unwritten rule where you don't make deals during the Stanley Cup final to
Hmm.
kind of draw attention from the league's final, but he's nonetheless, made a move here, and he's open for business, as he said. So it's interesting start to the off season.
Yeah, no, well put there, dude. Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. Obviously, there's some really big news. Now, we didn't jump on it day of. We kind of knew. We talked about it in the background. It's better that we kind of allow ourselves to think a little bit. We're not the immediate reaction. I'm sure everybody got enough of that. We're going to be a little bit more measured in what we say today. Just because we've probably been thinking about it a lot longer than other people when they immediately made their videos. Before we get started, though, I do want to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell if you want to be notified in the middle of the night when these come out. Yeah, and again, anything you guys do. By the way, we again, if you guys have not heard, we're definitely noticing in our numbers. Thank you all so much. It means so much to Vasili and I. We talk about it in the background. We're so happy that we're doing more. We're reaching out to more people. There's more coming. And for those who are not aware, we do not take a break in the off season. This will continue. We'll be there to cover all the events that the Flyers go through. So again, thank you for everybody who's new to subscribing. See a bunch of new subscribers as well. Thank you all so much for joining. And again, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks. They will be back open. They're not open yet, but Jim Steaks on 4th and South. Make sure to get yourself a cheesesteak. All right. So we got a lot to talk about today. So the show, obviously, we're going to talk about the big trade, the big Ivan Provorov trade. We'll talk a little bit about the Carter Hart supposed upcoming trade. We'll talk a little bit about Briere's press conference, talk a little bit about other players. We have a Fedotov update from overseas, Brian Zanetti update, a Tyson Forrester little news piece, a little bit about Simone Gagne, and then we'll end with playoffs. Vasili, let's get right into it. Ivan Provorov is no longer a member of the Philadelphia Flyers after years and years of a kind of a tumultuous time here where the team was constantly falling short. And I like to always point this out. This is something the city always does. When something goes wrong, they point at the best player, regardless who it is, and go, "It's your fault." They love to do that here. So that's kind of what we had here with Provorov for a while. Whether he went up and down with the team, he finally does see his way out. We'll talk about all the elements of that, but the Philadelphia Flyers have officially traded. I'll go through the trade here, and then Vasily, I'll open up to you, and then we'll go back and forth. So the official trade is the Flyers get goaltender, 28-year-old goaltender Cal Peterson. He played in the AHL last season. 28-year-old defenseman Sean Walker primarily will play the right side. Again, kind of a number 5, number 6 guy on your team. The other piece was Helge Grans, a prospect at 21 years old, taken the same year as Emil Andre, former teammate and line mate of his. We'll explore that a little bit as well. The first in 2013, that's the number 22nd in this draft. The second in 2024 from the Kings, and the second in 2024 or 25, depending on what Columbus chooses as the final piece. The Kings they get their cap space. They retain 30% on Provorov. We'll talk a little about that. They ended up with Kevin Connaughton from the Phantoms and Hayden Hodgson. Most likely those were a numbers game. And then Columbus ends up with Ivan Provorov at 70%, which is actually really great value if you look at him at a $4 million defenseman. Vasili, I'll open up to you for first thoughts. I talked a lot there. Let us have it.
Yeah, sure. So you look at this Provorov trade, and I guess it's something that's kind of been not in the works for a while, but it's something that's been rumored for a while. So I think what this kind of puts into perspective, and we've touched on it beforehand, right? Like there's been rumblings that potentially the player was not sure if he was, ready to go through a rebuild or potentially may have not been willing to re-sign with the Flyers. My initial thought, obviously, I'm not in the rooms here, but if you're Daniel Briere and you know have a hunch that an asset as valuable as Ivan Provorov is not going to resign with you or does not make a commitment to you, then this is kind of why we have this trade occur, because you want to obviously take the value from that asset that is Provorov and turn it into other valuable pieces that you can use. And it does point, I mean, towards the fact the Flyers are looking towards the future, right? They mainly grab, you know, a prospect in Helge Grans, and they get obviously the draft picks in the first rounder and the second rounders there. And they do take on some salary in Cal Peterson and Sean Walker from LA in order, you know, to get some extra draft capital. So the first thing in my first dissection of the trade is I like the return. When we were kind of first hearing the rumblings of it yesterday and the picks were not mentioned, me and you were going back and forth saying like, okay, if there's no picks here, this is an absolute fleece job. But obviously, like as the details come out,
Yeah.
you know, everything gets pieced together and you look at it and you really look at the return. And if you think about Provorov's last couple of seasons, they weren't the best seasons in his career, right? Like he's had better seasons in the past. So the fact that the Flyers were able to get, you know, the first in 2023 for 22nd overall, the second from the Kings, you know, the second from Columbus, a pretty solid prospect in Helge Grans, who is a second round pick 2 years ago and was like a high second round pick, I believe
35. 35.
Okay, 35th overall. That's really great value for a defenseman that a lot of people thought, oh, he's only a second pair defenseman. Well, news is, right, like if you're going to be paying this premium, obviously Columbus has him in a high regard that they're going to be playing him most likely in that top pair type role. That's my opinion. You have Zach Werenski, you have Provorov, put them together. That's a pretty awesome first pair. What I will say, though, is the Flyers make a great deal. They get a great return. And this is what you usually would expect for a player of Provorov's ilk. Like, we touched upon it last week, and shout out to Anthony DeMarco. I mean, he had the hunch last week about this. He reported all of this. He also mentioned last week in his article that, you know, the Flyers were looking for a return similar to what Ottawa gave up for Jacob Chychrun, what Edmonton gave up for Matthias Ekholm. If you look at those trades, you look at this Provorov trade, very similar in terms of like what the returns are. So I think that's spot on, right? Like the Flyers got value that was similar to some other top pair defensemen in the league in Chychrun and Ekholm. So that just kind of cements where Provorov's value is around the league in general. And it shows that there likely were other teams involved, right? Like we heard St. Louis might have been interested. I'm sure Columbus is the only team kicking tires on a guy who, you know, is entering his prime, can eat up a ton of minutes every night, you know, block shots, plays the PK, can help you on the power play. So there's a lot to dissect there, but I think the Flyers got great value. The one thing I will say, and I will caveat with, though, is despite the fact that they got a great return, it's obvious they're geared towards the future now. But Provorov, I mean, he was the best defenseman on this team last season. He's been the best defenseman, arguably, since he came into the league with the Flyers. Mm-hmm. The Flyers are not a better team tomorrow or next season. I mean, unless they obviously make some moves to immediately replace him. But like Columbus is an in-division rival that you just traded your best defenseman to, who technically got better than you today. The assets, who knows what the Flyers are going to do? Like, we have tons of thoughts, right? They might package some. They might do a whole whirlwind of things with these to potentially put themselves in positions to get better even quicker. But in terms of the short term, they are not a better team. The long term remains to be seen. Anything can happen. But overall, I think those are the two main things to take away. The Flyers got a great return, and Daniel Briere is, you know, crucial in doing that. Like, look at the creativity with the trade, right? Like, he uses LA as a broker here to take 30% of the cap hit in order for Columbus to essentially, you know, pay up extra, and then they also help LA taking contracts. So like Briere shows his creativity in his first deal here. It's something that Fletcher was lacking. You never really saw him bringing in teams as third-party brokers when majority of teams in the league have been doing this for years, right? So at least what it does show too, other than the great return, is that Briere, at least when he's making these deals, there's some sense of creativity to what's happening here, right? He's not just saying, okay, it has to be only with one team or it has to be straight up or something like that. There's a lot of moving pieces.
Or I'm sure he made more than 19 phone calls.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think it's a good
One of
sign
the
showing
dumbest
that.
things Fletcher ever said. Sorry.
Literally, I think it's a good sign that you see him doing this as his first move because it shows that he's going to be thinking out of the box going ahead, right? What do you think, Yuri? That was a very long-winded answer,
No,
but
no, it was
obviously
great.
there's a lot to say here. So
No, no, I wanted you to get that out. First of all, you touched on a bunch of stuff I was going to say anyway, so it's perfect. And again, I want people to recognize what Vasili is emphasizing here. We traded. This is interdivision. We're going to have to deal with this. Okay, so and those who are under the delusion that he's a second pairing defenseman, again, all the time when I keep hearing people talk about like, oh, I even heard Chris Terry say, he's not like Eric Desjardins. Well, Eric Desjardins came here in his mid-20s. The guy you played with, he was like close to 30. So like that, there's a difference there. Not that I don't love Desjardins, not that he's not a step above Provorov, but like it's okay. It's like there's not really a lot of young guys leading pairings. Like Cale Makar plays with Devin Taves. Like again, I'm not saying that he's not an amazing player, but he has help.
yeah,
And there's never been like Niskanen in no world is a number one defenseman. I'm hearing people talk to him like he's a number. He is not, he's a great number three for us. He fit excellent in a number two spot with Provorov.
yeah,
That's what it was.
exactly.
And he didn't have one good year. He had 3 good years. He had 2 bad years and 2 mediocre years. That was what Provorov did here. That doesn't make him a number one defenseman, but also doesn't make him a second pairing defenseman. Sorry.
He's somewhere. He's definitely a first pair quality level.
He's a young defenseman who fluctuated too much for what we expected. We expected him to hit that level and stay there and progress up, and we did, and he didn't for various reasons, some of which are excusable, some of which are not. That's the answer. That's the real answer.
That's a good way to put. That's a great way to put it. Really.
That's it. That's it. And he still has an opportunity. Probably will have a big season with Columbus. People wear that. Okay. First of all, let me get that out of the way. For the only thing I'll say is, at a neutral standpoint, you definitely nailed it, Vasili. The value here is clear. This is how you're supposed to make trades. You guys hear me talk about it all the time, not losing trades. This is what I'm talking about. We have the leverage. We have the position. We're in no rush to trade the player. You have the value. Get what you want. Fletcher would have not gotten this much. And quite frankly, until we got Grans and that other second, I wasn't impressed with the trade, to be honest with you. For those who think just getting a first and a second was good enough for Provorov, you're kidding yourselves. That would have been a loss. This is what makes it a good trade. That's Chuck Fletcher shit, where you get bare minimum. I don't want bare minimum. I want the player's actual value. And that's what we got here. And we took on dead weight to do it. Okay. And like Vasili said, we are not a better team today. We're a worse team today because of it. But the assets in which we were given allow us to position ourselves to be a better team. That is undeniable. And let's break down the assets real quick. And Vasili, maybe you disagree with me on this, but remember, when you're trading for prospects, or I'm sorry, for picks, not for prospects. Prospects are more of a guarantee, actually, because you can see them develop a little bit. But a pick is a potential, right? You have odds.
Yeah, it's a lottery ticket, really.
Yeah, the odds that 22nd pick will be as good as Provorov is not 100%. In fact, it's probably closer to 30% that it'll be as good as Provorov. The other picks included, they're also probably even less, probably around 15% that'll be as good as Provorov. But you got 1, 2, and then Grans, right? Another guarantee. So this is what I was talking about, right? The reason it makes it an even trade is because you know that the 22nd pick, it might not hit a Provorov level. But I got 2 more picks and a young defenseman to compensate. So the very least, I walk away. The odds are I'm walking away with 1 really good player from this.
There's a lot of lottery tickets there where you can say, okay, we have a lot of chances to replace him, and that's kind of what the Flyers are looking for here.
Exactly.
We touched
or
upon
make moves.
Yeah, or make moves to replace him. Use your assets to do other creative things, right? Like I think we mentioned it on prior weeks that if there was going to be a Provorov trade, we kind of outlined it in this manner that it's got like went down here, right? Like you're gonna get a first back for him. You're gonna get a prospect, a defensive prospect we mentioned that potentially could be also a replacement. Plus you got the extra 2 picks. So like if you look at it from a Flyers perspective, you lose your best defenseman, but hypothetically you could either replace him by picking another defenseman with that first. You either think Helga Grans is going to be a replacement, or those second round picks could end up being replacements. I mean, there's been over history in the NHL, tons of top pairing, really good defensemen have been picked in the second round. Does that mean the Flyers are going to hit
Correct.
on that? Who knows? But this is what you're doing when you're
It
trading.
increases the odds.
Yeah, you're trading something established for something that you, quite frankly, are unsure of how it will play out. But you've given yourself a lot of chances and a lot of different assets where, okay, now you have something, and you could either, go through with all those picks. You could take all those draft picks, pick in the first round this upcoming year, to make those second round picks, or you could kind of package them together and see if you want to do something there.
I would be extremely impressed if Briere could take the assets we have and not move TK or Hart and get us like Adam Fantilli. If
I
you're
would be
really,
very impressed too. I just think it's going to be tough for him to probably do that.
I think it is, but if you can get another one of these top 5 picks, it's possible. Like if you get, let's just say, and this is including Hart, right? Let's just say you trade Hart to Montreal. Again, I'm just theorizing. They give you the 5th overall. You have the 5th and the 7th. Now you can have a conversation for the number 2. You know what I mean? That's a real conversation. They have to consider that, because that would be tough for even us to trade, because you could make the case the other way. It's like, well, is there really that big of a difference? We could end up with Michikov and Dvorsky or whatever versus just Fantilli. I mean, that's, this type of draft is crazy. So again, that number 22 is a higher value than a normal 22. But if you really look at what the Flyers traded for Ristolainen, like at first when I heard the trade come in, I'm like, oh my God, it's less than what we gave up for Ristolainen. I was like really upset. It took time for this trade to come in. So those who were just happy initially with that news, that's crazy to me. But the trade in the end, that's where the win came, when you got the full deal. And to be honest with you, and you tell me if you agree with me on this, Vasili, do you feel that even Elliott was kind of surprised, and like the media that was covering it, they were like kind of like, oh, there's another second, and they got a player.
I mean, I think it was a very slow burn. It looks like they weren't entirely sure about all the moving pieces, and I think that does lend to some surprise, right? Because if you're looking at it from their perspective, they hear certain rumblings, and then all this comes out later. And I mean, if anybody listened to 32 Thoughts, it was kind of apparent that they didn't think that it was going to be like quite a haul that it ended up being. And I mean, maybe that kind of speaks to like what's happened the past couple seasons with Provorov. I really do think the last 2 seasons have definitely, I mean, I feel like this past season recouped some of his value. The 2 seasons beforehand definitely hurt it. If you remove those 2 seasons, though, like what are we talking about, like asset wise, right? Like, because those are really the 2 really bad ones. So it's hard to tell. Like, he obviously had a lot of value around the league to still go for this amount. Well, even though he hasn't been at his best, right? So,
well, we did look, we have a luxury in the cap department. Like, taking Cal Peterson is a loss. Sean Walker's, I mean, we can use
he's a depth defenseman. Yeah.
It's not, neither one of these pieces are really part of our plans. They are a negative to some degree in the very short term. In the long term, or even in the overall season, Walker will not be negative.
Walker only has 1 year left.
Yeah,
Peterson has a couple, right?
Yeah, we're not really sure. And again, obviously, it brings in the questions with Hart, and we'll talk about that. But we eat that, we pay for that. It's good because we don't need cap space. And I kind of ran the numbers earlier, and I kind of like threw out some RFAs, and I kind of like overstacked the Flyers lineup. I'll be honest with you, if we keep our current lineup and we re-sign all the RFAs, I mean, you're talking about like at least $5 million left in cap space, and that's without moving Kevin Hayes. This is not a team, and again, we're not trying to compete. So
they took the cap space to take on the assets because, I mean, if you're looking towards the future, they obviously knew that, okay, this next upcoming season for sure, they're not really planning to be very competitive. We'll see what happens on the ice. There's a lot of young guys. They could take bigger steps than they think. They may not do that. It's all really up in the air. But I think what the move definitely points towards, though, is the fact that, okay, if there's a chance for us to move an asset and we know that asset isn't for sure going to be in our long-term plans, if we get a return that makes sense and we think is the right value for that asset, we'll pull the trigger, basically. That's what it seems like to me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, the payment for Provorov was large. It was supposed to be large. If he didn't get a large return, He's dumb. And it had to be now for it to be large. If they came up, like let's say it was next season or whatever, it does get, it gets a little squirrely because you don't have as much leverage. Right now you have 2 years for Provorov for sure. As even
and it's only going to be 4 million now for Columbus. That's like,
see, that's where I'm a
value.
little surprised, because what did the Kings really, I guess that's why they threw in Sean Walker.
So basically what happens is the Kings overall, like they take 30% of Provorov, right? So he now is 4 million. That's
2 million. That's Sean, Sean Walker's contract.
They take 2.75 million basically for Provorov. The Flyers take Walker. It kind of evens out. I think the big thing for LA is they get rid of Peterson's contract. That was 5 million for them on the books. It was rumored by the Fourth Period, a bunch of other media outlets like, Darren Dreger's, Pierre LeBrun's, etc., that the Kings are looking to re-sign Vladislav Gavrikov, in which they acquired. Oh, they already did. Okay, I didn't even catch that today. Shows how busy.
It just happened like an hour ago.
Shows how busy work is for me, right? So anyway, I wasn't really paying attention to that one, but that was kind of the rumor that I saw yesterday, that the Kings were looking to clear that space so they could make that Gavrikov signing and lock him in, because they really liked him after acquiring him from Columbus.
Yeah.
So it looks like that's probably what it was, right? They moved Pettersson out to kind of fit in Gavrikov, and the Flyers kind of helped them out. It's almost like a thing where LA helps them out with the 30% for Columbus, and then the Flyers, help them out in terms of taking Peterson. It kind of makes you wonder, why don't the Flyers just eat the 30% themselves and not take Peterson? But
because you can move Peterson.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Do anything with
that. You could move him, but it also now points to like what's going on with this Hart stuff. Why'd you take a goalie back?
Yes, obviously that's the big question, and without a doubt, that's where it got real for me. Is obviously bringing a goaltender over, one that I know, quite frankly, Ersan would beat in camp. But like, I don't think Peterson's ceiling was ever that high. I think his ceiling was a 1B to begin with. I don't know why they gave him such a long-term contract. Like maybe I guess they were desperate. But I don't think he was ever projected to be that great. I was a little surprised. So again, here's the first thing. I mean, the takeaway is this team is rebuilding. Okay, we didn't know. All I could say, it wasn't at the top of my list. Right, I don't know what's going to happen. I say it all the time. No idea. Trading Provorov is not on top of my list. He's gone now. We got good return. If you're going to do it, this is the way to do it.
This is what you want to get back.
This is the way to do it.
Wise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It opens us up. We recognize now we're players in the draft. We can do more here. But if you're going to start doing this, then think about it. I find it really funny that everybody talks about, we're missing high-end talent. Yet everybody goes, we traded our number one defenseman. We get a 22 overall pick and essentially 3 second-round picks. None of that equates to immediate high-end talent. I just want to make that very, very clear, that I find that really funny, that it was just a smart hockey trade with values, and that it has nothing to do with high-end talent. It had to do with depth and a potential of finding somebody high end.
I think,
but it's not a guarantee of it.
I think I think it speaks to the point, Yariv, of the fact that the fan base is a little bit starved in terms of like seeing trades where you're actually getting the correct value for certain pieces you're moving on from. Like, this is the correct value for Provorov. This is what they should have essentially gotten, or something along these lines.
Right.
Whereas the previous regime, if they were making this trade, I mean, there's probably a chance. There's a slim chance that they're going to get this, in my view. So
I would bet that this started with the Flyers going, we will take the 3rd overall pick for Provorov straight up. I imagine,
and then progress to this potentially.
To this point. Again, that's what I would do. Knowing there's a low.
You start high. You start high and see what happens. Yeah.
So okay, well, what can I throw in my Can I throw in a pick from this year? To entice you to get rid of that number 3, right? I'm not going to give you a Provorov and the number 7 and number 3. That's not worth it to me. But maybe I give you a first from next year. Maybe give you a Florida's first, something like that. You know what I mean?
Maybe even both. Yeah. Who knows, right? Like there's a lot on the table. I think the main thing that we got to realize.
I don't think they give away both. I think the Flyers, from what I can tell, if they're doing the moves they think if they continue to do stuff like this
Yeah.
and ship guys out and just ship them out for picks, and mediocre players coming back, I mean, you're in the running for the top pick next year.
Yeah.
You're not going to trade that draft pick away.
No, yeah, that's true as well. You got to factor that in. We'll see, right? Like, I think the main caveat is Briere mentioned in the press conference. For us, he said we're looking at young guys and picks. We said it from the beginning, so that's the major reason, right? Like, they talked to Columbus, they see what Columbus is willing to give them. It's a variety of younger players and draft picks. And the Flyers are enticed by that. And I think, like I said, the main reason, and I mentioned it before, is likely because they were probably canvassing Provorov, canvassing his agent, and realizing, hey, like, maybe this guy isn't actually very committed to potentially being here in the future. So if that's the case, then why are we going to waste our time? Because like you were saying, Yariv, as the time goes by here, the Flyers lose leverage in the trade. They lose potential value because let's say you waited a season, he's now only got 1 year left on his deal, or you wait till the trade deadline.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's all these things to bring in, right? And Briere did say as well, like getting the 22nd overall pick in the draft, that was basically the critical point to the trade, which makes sense, right? Like if you're trading Ivan Provorov and a player of his talent level, like you not getting a first round pick would be asinine in this situation. So obviously, I think that's the main piece that they're looking for, and it'll be interesting now because they have the 2 firsts, and like we were talking about this kind of off air here. Like personally, if it's me, I would look to try to package to move up. I mean, there's been rumblings of that potentially happening. I know Darren Dreger's reported a couple weeks ago that Briere was going to be aggressive and he would be surprised if he tried to move up in the draft. So who knows? Like Dreger, a guy like that's plugged in, he obviously has his sources. So it'll be interesting to see if like what he said a couple weeks ago comes to fruition. But I think there's a lot of things that the Flyers potentially could do here, just with that extra number 1, right? Like you either you pick 7, you pick at 22. That could be 2 really good players in a stacked draft. It kind of almost reminds me of like
Richards,
the
Carter.
Yeah, Richards, Carter, or the year even
Provorov
and Konechny.
Yeah.
So like you get 2 pretty good players there, so it makes sense. Or alternatively, you could try to package the 7 and 22 and move up. In my eyes, I mean, we'll get into it more. I think unless you can somehow package those 2, you're gonna have to add way more to get to number 2. Like there's number 1's probably off limits. I would try to aim for number 2 or number 3. That might be hard to get. You'd assume if they were gonna get number 3, they would have already gotten it from Columbus here. Personally, for me, 7 and 4, like the talent level, the range, like what it's going to take to move up to 4,
it's not worth it.
It's probably not worth it. Yeah, unless there's a guy you're totally in love with. But
that I've actually heard from. I mean, I don't necessarily believe this, but I've heard from 3 to 12. But I kind of like I don't really believe in the tiers too much. Like I actually don't even believe there's a big difference between Fantilli and Michkov, like we're talking about. Like again, that's just the Russian factor thing.
I personally think Michkov's better than Fantilli in my opinion.
Yeah, at least offensively, he projects higher right now. But I will say the Flyers, what they need is exactly Fantilli.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's exactly what this team needs, is a bona fide number 1 center that you can build this team around, and a guy who projects to be one of the best centers in the NHL. That's what the Flyers need. I don't know what it would take to get to that pick, but that is what I would try to get to. I'm not. That is the type of thing where you can go big and even lose a little bit just to make sure that you don't have to worry. But this is why I'm not comfortable trading Carter Hart unless it leads to something like this. Like people, I heard some stuff, and I guess we can get into that a little bit. I heard some people talking about, late first round pick and a prospect. Okay, then not interested.
I would never. Yeah, that doesn't.
Why? See,
doesn't make a lot of sense.
People have this disillusion, like, we're overvaluing. We're not overvaluing Carter Hart. That is not true. I know what I'm seeing. I don't need any media person to agree with me. I promise you. I do not care. I could be the only one saying this. I know what I'm seeing. You do not make that type of decision with this type of player. You know what you're giving away. You put this guy on one of the best teams in the league. He's going to have the best numbers in the league. We're going to look like fucking idiots again. And we will look kind of stupid with Provorov because he's going to do well, that decor. Like anybody who thinks he's going to go
about Columbus's
part.
Yeah, think about Columbus's top 4.
That's not what he's
now.
worth. Yeah.
Right now with Provorov, Columbus's top 4 projects to be Werenski, Provorov, Juracek, and Adam Boquist. That's like a really, really good top four. And two of
Yes.
those guys are like guys that are younger D-men that like are just getting into their
It
best
could be,
years,
I
right?
could see
So
Provorov and David Juracek being a pairing next year.
yeah, I could see that. But even Werenski and Provorov aren't really that old to begin with anyway. They're
They're taking the
25,
same year,
26.
one
Yeah, so
after
like
another. Werenski was right after
that's a
Provorov.
really young and stacked defense. So I mean, like Jarmo Kekalainen, he's building it really
And
in
for
a good
those who are
way
not
at
aware,
back end. So
yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but those who are not aware, the immense amount of injuries that team had, they're actually not that bad. And they're about to add
no,
a top 3 pick in the draft to a team that's
and
probably
Provorov,
not,
yeah,
yeah, it's probably not supposed to be at the very bottom of the NHL. It's a pretty good move for them to add Provorov. It's our division. We're not looking good in our division, but it is what
no,
it is. Again, I don't think anybody's going to be upset because it's targeted. There feels like a plan here. They obviously didn't get worse for no
yeah,
reason. They got
yeah,
worse to get better in the future, and
and
they got the assets to do so. And he did a great job. I do want to make that clear. Danny Briere knocked it out of the park with
he
this.
did an awesome job for his first trade.
100%.
And I think too, another thing to kind of mention is like when you look at it, Provorov is kind of that pick that was taken in the Hextall era there. And if you look at it, like everybody thought as he was taken, okay, he's going to be a bona fide number one defenseman
Yeah.
based off his first couple seasons. That's what everybody thought. I think Briere making this type of trade as his first, it's really a splash, but it also signifies like a change in eras. Like, okay, like I want to
Yep.
put my stamp on this team, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I think it kind of, I mean, it does get fans excited, right? Like you have the Flyers haven't won a trade arguably since that Giroux trade, and
And it didn't
I
feel
think
like it when they won the trade, right?
yeah,
So
exactly
perception
right.
was not there, but
Yeah,
it's a good point.
whereas with this one, it actually is right. Like if you look at the perception around this trade, I wouldn't say that most are saying the Flyers won, but the Flyers did get a haul back for Provorov, and Columbus also gets a really good
I
player. So it's one of those trades that's going to be good for both teams, I
I
think.
can think of 2 trades in recent history where clear cut felt like the Flyers won those trades, and we've mentioned both of them on here. One in to an excess, but the Matt Niskanen trade felt to me. I know not everybody agreed, but at the time felt like a huge win.
That's a big win, yeah.
And then the Braden Coburn for a first and Radko Gudas.
Yeah.
Radko Gudas had a torn ACL that year, so wasn't even playing. So we knew he was a pretty good young defenseman. We got younger at D, and it enables to get Travis Konechny. So again, that's a great trade. Um, again, I think we'll look back at history. I want to bring up the Richards Carter thing I have before, but I want people to just be aware that how trades, even if you get the value, they can be even for teams regardless. And again, the Richards trade, for those who are not aware, they got Wayne Simmons, Braden Shen, and a second round pick, which I believe turned out to be Anthony Stolars.
Yes,
right. And that obviously value for Mike Richards. Look, Mike Richards is a great player, but you got 2 great players and a backup goaltender in the NHL.
Great value, yeah.
Great value.
But great trade for the Kings because they won their cups and they needed Richards to do so.
Exactly. And the Flyers were never as good again. And I bring that up. Jeff Carter, he was traded. The Flyers I would say they dominated this trade because Columbus didn't even keep that guy. And the Flyers, and it's kind of crazy to think about it out loud. They got Jake Voracek, who's just as good as Jeff Carter. They got Sean Couturier, who I would argue is better
Nick
than
Cousins,
Jeff Carter. And they got Nick Cousins, who was the third, ended up being
the pick that ended up
he's in the finals today.
You know what's funny to mention too is those trades are with Columbus and LA, and this Provorov trades with Columbus and LA.
Didn't obviously, think about that till you just said that.
Obviously,
that's crazy.
It's a funny coincidence. That. It's a very funny coincidence, but it's just interesting that it's the same teams involved there.
That just blew my mind, dude. I didn't even think about that. Holy shit, nobody's mentioned that until right now. I haven't even thought about that. Boom. Hot take.
Yeah.
Good shit. So, all right, let's talk about the Carter Hart thing, because obviously that came up immediately as Provorov was traded.
I believe Anthony DeMarco reported initially that he expected, Carter Hart deal was being worked on. He later clarified him and Mertidis, they did a really good stick to hockey and kind of went over everything. And he was saying that he just heard rumblings that they were working on a deal. He didn't mean it as in, okay, this is imminently happening right now. And I
In
mean,
fairness,
Yeah,
that's how I took his message.
yeah, I
I
agree.
didn't
I
take
think
it
I took it
as
the same.
imminent.
I took it the same way as well. And I mean, Briere was asked in the press conference, right? Like, there's been a lot of rumblings about Carter Hart. Like, what was the thoughts there? And he said, well, it's like I've been saying, since he started, we're open for business, and if a trade makes sense, it makes sense, right? But
Well,
I think
let's be honest. How many teams are calling about Carter Hart?
there's probably a lot of teams calling about him because he's a 24-year-old goalie just going into his prime. And you got to understand, right? Like most goalies don't come into the league till 25. So the fact that he already has all this experience under his belt at such a young age makes
And
it even more
success.
valuable. Yeah, and success. Like he's been really good in the playoffs. He outdueled Carey Price in a playoff series victory. People seem to forget that. They don't really bring that up, but
Yeah.
I think that's something to really mention, right? Like you're beating or you're facing off against one of the best goalies, and you put up a performance to match him, which Carter Hart has done. He's played behind a team that's been pretty bad most of the time he's been here, and that's really held back his stats, or else I think he would really be even regarded higher. So in a sense, it kind of hurts the Flyers because his stats aren't as great as they should be. So you could get low balls in there, but it's just really interesting. I mean, Darren Dreger's brought up in terms of the Carter Hart speculation that the Flyers are engaged in discussions, but at this stage they're listening, engaging the level of interest. So what that means really for me is that like the Flyers would be open to trading him, but I think it's in two particular types of deals. And I kind of had a tweet about this, and like there's no sources or confirmation really on anything, but this is my understanding of it.
Speculation. Sure.
Yeah, if you're trading a guy who's 24 years old, very young for a goalie, has always been highly regarded as one of the potential next best goalies in the league. The
A
pedigree's there, the
24-year-old
potential's there.
starting goaltender.
Yeah,
Exactly.
24-year-old starting
Clear cut.
goaltender. He's under RFA control, so you have control to sign him as well. Like if Philly are looking to trade him, it's either for an absolute like haul in return where you're getting multiple first round picks, multiple high end
I mean,
prospects back for him, or they're trying
right.
to move up in this draft, right? I think
Well,
those are the only two ways you're gonna look to trade him. Like if you're getting back, like you said earlier, let's say is a late to mid first rounder and a good prospect, like it's just not worth it from the Flyers if that's what the value is, right? The value has to be there either similar to this Provorov deal where you're getting at least a mid first round pick back. You're getting probably a guy that was drafted in the first round as well, a couple second round picks as well, at least, or you're using Hart as a chip and your number 7 and 22 to move up to that number 2 spot, let's say, or something along those lines,
well,
right?
I think to be honest with you, to get to the number 2 spot, I would never give anything more than Hart in the number 7, and I think they would easily say yes to that. To be honest with you,
Yeah, I could see it potentially, but
I don't.
it's going to be
Hold
tough to
on,
move up nonetheless.
yeah, but let me get this out because if you actually want to look at it, it's actually Alexander DeBrincat is probably the closest thing. You have a 24-year-old guy. He's a star player at his position. He's one of the best versions of it. They're not normally available, right? DeBrincat at 24 being a 50 goal scorer, like, you know what I mean? You don't get those guys normally at that age. You got to pay. They gave a number 7 pick.
Very true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying. You want Carter Hart, and that's why I talked about it. I was like, I don't know how it's possible, but you got to blow me away. This whole late first round pick and a good prospect. Yeah. Why?
It doesn't make sense.
We have plenty of picks now. So explain to me, why do I need a late first round pick? How does any of that going to lead to me replacing this guy, which kind of we don't need to, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I just don't understand. That's not a trade that makes me go, ooh, like it has to be something really enticing. And then I think to get that at number 2, to your point, Carter Hart. Here's the problem. When I say value-wise, I think they would do it value-wise because Carter Hart's worth a lot. But what worth is Carter Hart to
Anaheim right now when they have John Gibson already?
They have
the trade doesn't make a lot of sense for them, right?
That's my problem. And outside of the number 2 pick, I'm not.
Well, number 3,
it's not really worth it.
To caveat, Yariv, number 3, I'd be interested because I mean. Potentially
Will Smith, Carlson,
Michkov. So like those guys could be pretty close to generational as well as Fantilli might be there. Like I said, I think Michkov is going to be better than Fantilli. That's my personal opinion.
Offensively,
offensively. Defensively might not be as much of the complete package, but
Right.
we'll see.
But
Obviously,
offensively, Mitch Cousins.
he's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
My thought though is
Maybe
okay.
60 goal scorer.
First off, Anaheim, they don't like unless like they're going to get rid of Gibson, then it doesn't really make sense for them to get Hart. So that's one thing. The second thing is Columbus has that third pick. So if they just made a deal with them, you would have assumed that if they were going to
That
be
would have
willing to move the
been
third pick, that would have been somehow
included.
incorporated. And then at that point, like number 4, am I moving Carter Hart to get to number 4? Like if it's Carter Hart straight up for that number 4,
Yeah,
then maybe.
then
But
maybe.
if
Yeah.
it's the 7 and Carter Hart for 4, I think that's an
No.
overpay from our
Yeah,
perspective.
I'm
So
not
I don't
doing
think
that.
it's a good trade. Yeah, the Hart thing, man. Like I'm a
The,
goalie guy, and this is the first time the Flyers have ever really had a bona fide number 1
here,
goalie in my lifetime. So I think just like everybody likes the idea of, oh wow, like Danny Briere's making these big trades, he's
right.
making splashes, he's making deals. We all like the idea. It's fun. Let's be real,
Yeah.
right? Like it's fun. It's fun thinking about the idea of trading Carter Hart, but
Not
they
to
have to
me.
be
Makes
they
me
have to
anxious.
be yeah, it is. I mean, that anxious is a good word, but they have to be very careful in what they do here, I think. And the reason being is that you have a guy that you drafted. He's gone through some growing pains with you. Like it hasn't been, just
And
a
come out on
straight,
top.
yeah, a straight line up, right? So like he's got through all that. He seems like, he's just getting into his prime and getting into his best years now. So you're going to move on from him when he potentially could be like a really good starter for the next 8 seasons or so, and like the Flyers could be good in that period. Obviously, if they were going to move him, their thought process is likely this: okay, we have Sam Ersson, we have Kolosov, we have Fedotov, who potentially could be back in the mix now. Like we'll get into that later. Their thought obviously is okay, we have Ersson, that's going to be our guy, but they have to be very careful because, like, as much as I like Ersson and the fact that he played really well in the SHL before he came over to North America, played really well in the AHL, he played really well in about 10, 12 games last season for the Flyers. It's only a 10 to 12 game sample size for a goalie. That's not a lot of games. There's been many, many different times and periods with the NHL where a goalie's looked good for about 12 games and then has sucked the rest of his career. Jim Carey, Andrew Hammond, Michael Layton, like the list goes on and on and on. So
Yeah.
like I like Ersson, and I think personally for me looking at his technique, the way he plays in net, I think he's going to be a really good goalie. I think he has the potential to be a starter, but like are you 100% sure on that right now? I would say no. So you just have to be treading in careful waters here because you move a guy like Hart and Ursa doesn't turn out, then I mean you're looking for a goalie all over again. And I mean I
Yes.
know you have Kolosov, I know you have Fedotov, but those guys are a little bit removed in the KHL. Who really knows what's going to happen with those two? Like you're putting yourself in a position where sure the return you get could be great, but I mean we all
Depends on the
know,
return. Again, it depends on
yeah,
the
depends
return.
on the return, but we all know one of the hardest things for rebuilding teams to do is usually find a goaltender. You already have one, so you
And he's
moving
young.
one, yeah, and
Yeah.
he's 24. You already have one, so moving one that just adds another check or box that you're gonna have to check off down this rebuild line here, where you're gonna have to find another goalie. Urson could be that, but I don't think there's enough sample size yet to know, and I even like him, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I just want to make sure that what we get back is I'm just not enamored with late first round picks. Like for people who are not aware, like majority of the time those guys end up being middle six forwards.
yeah,
Like they're Scott Lawton. They're not Claude Giroux.
yeah.
Okay. Like they're both taken around the same area. That the Claude Giroux thing is extremely lucky. The David Pastor thing, it's lucky. The odds are you're gonna get a good NHL player, but there's no guarantee that you're gonna be a great NHL
Or a
player.
first liner. Like chances are you're picking at 22, you're going to
Yeah.
get a second, third line guy,
And
which is not high end talent that everybody
And
is
goalies,
looking for,
goalies,
right?
it's even more of a crapshoot. Like,
Yeah,
forget the
exactly.
first round at all. That most of the time that doesn't even fucking matter if you took him in the first, second, third. It's just who made it to the age 22, 23, and is projecting to be one of the best goalies in the
Yeah,
league. We have one who we took in the second round
yeah.
again, but it was a crapshoot. We don't always know. There's a lot of other good Canadian goalies like Zach Ficale, right? He was a second round pick.
And look at his career right now, right?
Look
I
at
mean,
Spencer Knight.
yeah, It's true. It's not always a guarantee. Like I said, it's hard. It's really hard to
And you
predict with
thought he was a
goalies.
guarantee too. That's
Yeah,
not a guy that
literally.
I went like, oh yeah, what a risk on.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's hard with goalies, and you have the goalie now. So like, unless, like I said, for me personally, unless you're getting, I think if they're going to trade Hart, they're going to need to get either like they're moving up in the draft, and it makes sense because you get the Fantilli or you get that kind of close to generational guy you're looking for, or you're trading with another team and you're getting a very impact roster player back, and like a couple first rounders, high end prospect. Like it's going to have to be a haul of a deal, and when I mean a
Yeah,
haul, even close to more assets than what you just got for Ivan Provorov. And I don't know if
in my opinion,
teams
it have to be
necessarily,
more.
yeah, and I don't know if teams necessarily are going to give that up for a goalie in this market, because if you look at goalie trades, they usually don't. So like you're putting yourself in a rock and a hard place.
Well, there isn't a good
Comparable
sample
for
for
Hart.
this.
Yeah, it's
There's
hard to
no
gauge.
who has traded a potential superstar goaltender at 24 years old when he was known for his reputation, his pedigree,
I don't know, man. I
and
mean,
he
the
is a
closest
starter. He's not broke. He's
the
not
closest is
broken.
what's that Corey Schneider trade from Vancouver? Maybe
It,
that,
he
but that
got
didn't
both.
really even work out. Yeah.
I mean, it did for one of the teams
Well, yeah,
from
definitely.
Vancouver. They took Bo Horvat with that pick.
Yeah, it's true.
They got a top
But
10
that's the
pick, right?
last, right? That's the last kind of trade I can remember where you have a real high end goalie get traded,
That's
and that was a
that's what I'm
while back.
saying. That's
So
your sample. Like, and honestly, you got to look at teams like Detroit. They had
yeah,
number 8 pick, I think, in the draft
yep,
right after us.
yep.
I mean, their team looking to improve. They don't have a legit number one like Hart. There's actually most teams in the league don't. That's why,
That's why I
in
think
my
there's
opinion, everyone is calling.
drive up the interest, get as much as you can if you are going to trade him. I
There
mean,
are
the
only a
interesting,
handful of teams that have a better reward
yeah, the
on paper.
interesting thing that I heard, on that Stick to Hockey podcast, DeMarco once again mentioned something that I thought was interesting and to bring up here, and I kind of want
Sure.
to get your thoughts, Yariv. Essentially, what he said was Cal Peterson's agent, based on what he heard, is
Yeah, I
under the
heard this.
impression Carter Hart will be traded. Like, I mean, what's your thoughts there?
I don't care what the agents say.
I hear you. It's
I'll say
interesting to
that
me.
because
I feel you.
they have their own
You have their players' interests in mind there. I
exactly.
just
If you
thought,
guys watch Entourage at all, you will know how agents behave from that
oh
show.
yeah, exactly. They're looking to
Yeah,
do the best for their players. So
always
obviously, he's going to be telling his
as
player,
they should.
of course, you're going to get a chance to get back in the NHL, right? Like the team's looking to make moves. I just thought that was something interesting to mention. I'll also
I mean,
caveat as
theoretically, he could be a backup here next year. That is true.
yeah, Pedersen.
Fighting for a spot with Airson or whatever. But he's not better than Airson.
No, yeah, exactly. I think one thing to note for sure as well, and this was kind of brought up by Anthony Sanfilippo on Snow the goalie, that there's a lot of Canadian teams interested in Hart, which isn't surprising. Just the fact that he's a Canadian goalie, having him as the number
Well,
one in a Canadian market. I mean, that's
this is what I
obviously
say.
a marketing perspective. But
If I could see any team crazy enough to make this trade, it's the Canadians. The
yeah,
second coming of Carey Price for the number 5 pick in the draft. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
they could sell that to their fans. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's very difficult to trade a pick like that. Most teams would be very skeptical. Carter Hart's a big name, though. It's like, hey, yeah, we traded number 5 pick, but look, we got the first overall last year. We're getting better. It was really injury problems. We just re-signed Cole Caulfield. Look,
They have
we just
Suzuki, they have Slavkovsky, they got a good
right. We
base.
just took
Right?
care of our goaltending for the next 10. I'm just saying they could sell it. I have no fucking idea what they're going to do. And I don't know what the Flyers are going to get. I don't know if they're going to trade Carter Hart. I can tell you I'm losing sleep over it. It makes me really uncomfortable. For those who are not aware, before Carter Hart was here, we were constantly known for having a mediocre goaltending tandem. And
For
we're
about
not
a long time, like
yes.
20 years or more.
I
So
have no interest in creating that problem again. The
yeah,
only way I can create that problem is if you give me a direct line of sight to a star player.
which makes
Otherwise,
sense then. Yeah.
it to me,
Well,
it's not worth the risk.
yeah,
Personally,
I think what we've done here, man, like we're kind of dissecting it, and I think as we're talking, it's becoming more clear, right? Like, unless the Flyers have a legitimate way to move up into this top three, or they get like the fifth overall straight up for him or something along those lines, like you're saying, or like even fourth overall,
would you trade the
uh,
5 and 7 for 2?
the 5 and 7 for 2. Like if I traded Hart for number 5 and then I had 5 and 7 for 2. Um, I mean, I'd offer it. I don't know if Anaheim's gonna take it, right? It
I mean,
depends how much they covet Fantilli. I think for
I
sure
don't think
if you
they
got the
cover
five,
Fantilli as much as the fans do.
it's definitely possible. I think 5 and 7, you're getting really close. Like they might try to finesse you and be like, give me
I mean,
22.
the value's there.
The value's there. That what Anaheim's going to try to finesse and do in that situation is they'd be like, okay, 5 and 7 and 22, but then the Flyers would probably counter and
It
say,
wouldn't.
no, we'll give you a second maybe or something.
I'll be honest with you. I think the 22nd and the 7 could get us up to 5, potentially 4. I don't
Yeah,
think it could
maybe.
get us higher than that. Obviously, because Columbus would be involved at that point.
Yeah,
Definitely not.
I think at that point it'd have to be like you said, Hart for the 5, and then you package
There's
5 and 7 together.
there's just not a big difference between even 3 and 7 to us because we're ignorant hockey
Yeah.
fans. And again, I'm including us. We all, I want to bring this up because again, this happens every year around draft time. We're all guilty of it, myself included. You pick a player, you fall in love with them, you're sure that they're going to be the best player. And then years down the line, you see, oh, there was a crop of really good guys, and the one guy you didn't consider actually ended up being better than the guy you liked, even though he's still good, but the other guy was better. And again, I use Mikko Rantanen as an example. I wanted Ivan Provorov. I wanted Barzal. Looking back, I'd prefer Mikko Rantanen. None of us had him on the radar. Nobody talked. Elias Pettersson. Nobody had him on the radar. Everybody talks about Makar and Heiskanen, but we would have been happy with Elias Pettersson too, right? So this is what I'm saying. It's like, let's not pretend like we know how these guys are going to show. The reality is this draft is full of high-end talent.
Well, yeah.
We know we're getting one of them. And that's why I say, if you have an opportunity to get 2 of them, right, versus just one, and you look at a team like Anaheim, who has Trevor Zegras as a number 1 center, they can maybe be like, oh, well, we can get our number 1 winger and a guy at number 1 center at 5 and 7. So, and to us, we're like, well, we really need the number 1 center. Like, we don't have
the needs
that.
are different for sure.
We do with Couturier, but he's a risk.
Yeah, the needs are different, and I think if you look at Anaheim, they do have some more younger pieces that are like more high end that could kind of make a deal like that, like you were proposing, or even make more sense because like they have Zegras,
and they
Troy
love
Terry
too.
Yeah,
hometown boy.
Zegras, Troy Terry, and Mason McTavish. So.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Would you trade Cam York and the number 7 for obviously for the number 2, but you'd have to add.
You have to add for that. I mean, of course I would do that. But Anaheim will want a lot more. They'll want York 7, 20, 22 overall, maybe more.
Okay, would you do that? Let's just say
York 7 and 22 overall for number 2.
It's our best defensive prospect.
I do it
a strong first in the later stage, and then
I would do it, and the reason being is because, like I said, the Flyers need centers, and Adam Fantilli's pretty much locked in to be like he looks like he's
number
going to be
one
center, right? So I would do it, but I mean, it does set the Flyers back in terms of the defense because their defense is pretty barren.
It's a high cost, and you remove the opportunity to draft a defenseman in the first round too. So you're going all in on that center. See, that's what I mean. A lot of people, they like to look at trades and be like, oh, no way anybody would move Adam Fantilli. Well, you would if you actually look at it and you win the trade.
Well, from a team building perspective, right? Like
Anaheim needs a lot.
Yeah.
They're more behind than we are.
I think something to bring up just with the draft, like personally, like you're saying, if you have to let's say move number 7 and move Hart to only go to 4 or 5, that's what the ask is. That's asinine. I don't think the Flyers should do that. It's not worth it. I think the guy you're going to get at 7 is going to be pretty close to the same talent level that you'd be picking at number 5 or 4. What's interesting that I saw on Twitter the other day here is Grant McKegg, pretty highly regarded scout, tweeted this out. He said, there's 7 players I'd be more than happy for the Habs to take a 5th overall, with understanding that Fantilli and Bedard will be gone. If you're a Habs fan, they pass on 1 or 2 of your faves. Don't be livid. Habs are getting a very good player regardless. He then mentions he had an NHL scout tell him that the draft order could be any way from 3 to 12, and he agrees with that. He says, don't expect any specific order and expect surprises. It's part of what makes the NHL draft so fun. So, like, for example, right, like
this year.
everybody, everybody has like like I've seen him tweet this specifically, and I've seen others. Like everybody has, okay, you got Better 1, you got Fantilli 2, and then Carlson potentially 3, Michkov. Okay, after that though, those kind of 4 guys, I really think that anything could potentially happen. I think other scouts, other teams,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please.
Other scouts, other teams, like they've probably seen certain guys more. They probably lean towards certain guys. Like, who knows how it's going to go? Like this Grant McKegg, I mean, he's been scouting for a long time, was a pro scout in the past. Like he said, lots of teams have Dalibor Dvorsky in their top 5 that he's talked to.
Right.
And so, like, who knows, like, what's going to happen, right?
And that's my point. What if for some reason he gets taken above Will Smith?
At 3, then let's say if you did make that trade to 4, it doesn't even make a lot of sense. You could have either way, the way it unfolds. Let's say if somebody gets picked in that manner, like someone's gonna fall, right? And then it's kind of like, why did we even do that?
So. I don't know. I don't know what the Flyers are gonna do. I really don't. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I do. I know the good and the bad of making each decision.
Agreed. Yeah.
Carter Hart is not on the top of my list to trade. However, I will say this. It clearly, the Flyers are going the long-term approach. I mean, if we had any question, right, which I was kind of like 50-50 on it, this trading Provorov, again, you have to assume that Provorov was going to leave. It signifies that. If they trade TK now, forget it. You're going full rebuild. And expect other veterans to leave shortly after. I mean, actually, if you look at the defense right now, outside of Travis Sanheim and Cam York, I don't think any of these guys will be here by the time we're good.
Yeah, I mean the only
Sanheim
one
because of the no trade clause in York.
Yeah, especially the veterans, like the younger guys. I mean, will be around, but like D'Angelo, Sealer, Ristolainen. I mean, maybe Ristolainen because he got the 5-year deal. But if they're really going towards
he's near
youth,
30.
They could. That's what I mean. If they're going towards youth, like they're going to try to get rid of him at some point.
Yeah.
It's interesting, man. Just with this Hart stuff, like my thoughts, and just to kind of sum up here, I guess before we move on, is personally, I wouldn't trade him unless you're really moving up into that top 3, or like you said, you're getting a haul where you're getting even more assets.
Got to be a top 10 pick at least, in my opinion.
Yeah, at least you're either getting moving up into that top 4, top 3, like something like that,
or it has to be like a top prospect from around the NHL that was taken in the top 10 at some point.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what I mean.
Like an Owen Tippett, which people want to pretend he was a,
or Logan Cooley, like something like that, right? You're getting like a really high end center prospect for a need that another team might not be so
even
interested
then
in,
though, dude. Like it's so rare to be in a position that we're in with goaltenders. I'm not saying that there's no way to trade. Like you absolutely should not trade Carter Hart ever, but again, we're opening up a wound in this team that potentially could take a while to fill. Everybody likes to jump on Ersan. I loved what I saw from him, but again, it's like
very small sample with a goalie.
We want to be a goalie factory, and like now we're forcing another young goalie, and that I guess that's why you get Peterson, and then we just beat him into the ground until we don't need him anymore, just because we're not going to be. That might be the thought where we're like, well, we don't really care that much of Peterson. He's 28 years old. To him, it's a project, right? His numbers could be absolutely awful. We don't care because we might not get anything for him in the end anyway. And we can protect Ersan for a couple years. We can have Sandstrom as a backup. Like, again, if you do believe that you're taking a back seat for at least
then these moves make sense.
Yeah. Then losing Carter Hart makes sense because most players aren't going to want to be around if a team is like tanking. And that's the closest thing to tanking is just getting rid of your best players.
One other thing I wanted to bring up before we end on Hart, and this is for the 32 Thoughts podcast. So there's a couple thoughts.
Sure.
So Friedman was saying that obviously Montreal might be a team that's very interested. We kind of touched on that. Apparently Toronto and Treliving, I know they're in on a lot, and they're looking to add the goalies. That'd be interesting. I don't think Toronto has the assets that we're looking for.
That's what I'm saying. You have nothing
unless it's one of these like big 4 where you're getting Nylander.
Would you trade him for Mitch Marner?
Hart for Marner
with that huge fucking contract, mind you.
I would do it. Yeah,
it would have to be more than that. It would have to be hard.
It'd be hard
some salary.
It'd be Hart plus, but I'd do it. Yeah.
What if it's like Hart and Scott Lawton for Mitch Marner?
Yeah. I'm doing it. I'm doing
And
the trade. He's a 100-point player, man.
yeah, I
That's
don't
what
think
the team needs. They need that dynamic skill.
I
So
don't think that's happening. By the way, if anybody's listening,
no,
I
but
was
it's
just
it's
throwing out
fun
random
to
shit.
it's fun to think about. Yeah, but so
I don't know if Toronto would do that.
Friedman mentions Toronto. Merrick, obviously, he comes in after that, and
Do you think they would do? Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think
go
that they
ahead.
would do Mitch Marner for Travis Konechny?
No way, man.
But they
No
would
way.
save so much money on the cap.
I mean, they save so much money, but this is what Toronto's gonna want. Like they're gonna want Konechny, and they're probably gonna want number 7 too.
There's no way they get that because
They're no,
they're
yeah,
trading him for the cap relief.
yeah, but that's
So
what they want, though.
you're getting a top line player and cap relief. There's no way you're getting the number 7 and the cap relief. That's absolutely not happening. You're coming from a position of weakness. So as I said,
And the
the only
Flyers
thing I would
counter
offer.
with then the Flyers counter with Konechny in 22.
Yeah, I mean, even then, I don't even know if I would be very interested in that trade. The only because I personally don't want Mitch Marner's contract. I know a lot of people might not agree with me on that. I'm not that excited to pay a winger $11 million a year. I would do it because he's a great player. You know what I mean? I'm not an
Yeah.
asshole, but I really want that money allocated to the key positions, which I'm gonna have to fill, which is number one
I
defenseman
think.
and
I
number one
mean,
center.
this might be a hot take, but I think if you're the Flyers, Marner played center his whole career. Played center
Is that
his
true?
first season. Yeah, he played center his whole career in junior. He
Oh, I didn't know that.
played center his first year with the Leafs, and
Like
they
the
moved him to
opposite of
wing.
Giroux almost.
Yeah, essentially. Like I think if the Flyers were to trade for him, they'd try him back at center probably.
That's
I
a
wouldn't be
really good point,
surprised.
actually. I like that point a lot. I mean, that's possible. And look, again, I'm talking out of my ass. I know how good Mitch Marner is. I'm not an asshole, but I do think people are a little bit underrating TK, and they're like, "Oh, it's not going to happen again." I don't really believe that.
I think he's a 35, 40 goal guy. As long as he has talent around him. Like if he's by himself on an
I mean,
island, sometimes it can be tough.
what's Mitch Marner without the guys he's playing with? Do you think I mean, he's doing. Look at Johnny Gaudreau without the talent he had around him. His numbers
Yeah,
dropped
I just
dramatically.
definitely I would just be interested from a Flyers perspective. Like if you somehow trade Konechny and let's say you trade the 22nd overall and you have to give up a second as well. Like it's gonna be something like that, or you have a prospect in there, whatever. The Leafs aren't just gonna do it straight up, no way.
To me,
But
Mitch Marner's not worth that much, dude. Maybe I'm on an island of my own, but I don't look at Mitch Marner as like, oh, he's gonna save my franchise type of guy. I'm
no,
like,
no, but
I
he's
have a top
definitely
line. I want to add him on there. He's like a
yeah,
Huberdeau.
I mean, that's a good comparison. I just think that like there's a lot of value in him because he's so young. I mean, Konechny's pretty young too, so obviously you gotta look at it from both
Marner's
ways.
definitely worth more than connecting. I want to make that very clear. I'm not
Yeah,
delusional on that. There's a
it'll
reason he gets
be
paid
it'll
twice as
be
much.
it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I personally don't think the Leafs are going to be a team involved here. I
I
just
don't
don't
think
think
they're
they
gonna
have.
trade any of the core four, by the way.
Hey, we'll see. I just don't think they have the assets that the Flyers would be interested in. I think if they're going to trade hard, it's going to be to move up in the draft. I think like guys like Dreger, I've mentioned Briere wants to be aggressive, and I mean it's kind of showing that he is being pretty aggressive right now in what he's trying to do. One last thing I want to bring up about Hart is Merrick brings up on the 32 Thoughts podcast that one team you wondered is San Jose. That's a team that doesn't want to take a step back. You know, they really have to start to turn this team over. There's not going to be a classic teardown. That kind of is interesting because San Jose hasn't really had a number one goalie since Martin Jones, and he wasn't really the classic number one.
It's really
Like
Nabokov.
Nabokov, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, right? So like they are kind of looking to turn the page. I think if you could trade Hart for number 4 straight up, like we were kind of talking about, or Hart for number 5, the Montreal, like that's pretty enticing. Because then you
That
have
would be the only.
two,
That'd be the only interest I really have is
yeah,
in that range. Again, it needs to be, and this is what we were talking about earlier. It needs to be. I need a guarantee that I'm going to
yeah,
get what I'm looking for.
yeah, exactly.
Not a hope and a dream. That doesn't help me in this case. Not with trading a guy like Hart, because
No,
Hart is a
yeah,
guarantee for you. You know what he
exactly.
is. Whatever team's trading, the same thing with Provorov. You know what he is, and you know you can get more out of him too. And same thing with Hart. You know you can get better numbers on him. You put Carter Hart on any of the teams that made the playoffs this year, his numbers are dramatically better.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It's like
So
same with Provorov. You put him on any top team, his
I
numbers are gonna be better.
yeah, I just think the Flyers with this one they got to be wary on what they're doing. I think
Who knows? I
unless
got
it's a
everything wrong so far.
unless it's a massive overpay and you're getting the haul back or you're moving up in the draft. Personally, I mean, it would probably sound like broken records here, but I just don't do it. But we'll see what happens. And if he gets moved, I think the Pedersen stuff's real interesting. Bringing Peterson in, like, it definitely points towards something. Like some goalie has to be potentially on the way out, it looks like, for the Flyers, right? Because right now, if you have keep Peterson and you keep Hart, you have Hart, Urson, Sandstrom, Peterson. Like, obviously, you could just bury Peterson in the minors, and that's cool. But Sandstrom, I don't think, is going to be happy with being an AHL goalie. So if you're doing that and not making him a backup, you're probably looking at him going back to Sweden. So we'll see what happens, right? I think there's a lot at play here with this Hart stuff.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot more to come. So I guess we'll touch on the presser here a little bit. The only thing I was thinking about with the presser, really just to bring up, is that, you know, the main takeaway I got out of it is that he's open for business. You know, he has not stopped saying that. That means everyone is available to a degree.
If it's a right trade, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean everybody is being traded, but, you know,
they're
clearly, that was the big thing I took away from it, really.
Yeah, there's not much. I mean, it wasn't the longest press conference or anything, and a lot of it, I mean, it's surrounding the Provorov stuff, which we got into. We kind of mentioned some quotes from him already. Mm-hmm. I would say, in terms of the presser, the main takeaway, like you're saying, is just the open for business thing. Like, we know that the Flyers, and this is what he said multiple times, I'm going to make trades if it makes sense. If it makes sense, right? So, like, that's what you have to look at with the Hart thing. I think, sure, Briere is willing to gauge the interest on Hart and what the value is, because he'd be doing himself a disservice if he just said, hey, well, I'm not going to listen to what I could get for Carter Hart, because why wouldn't you? Because let's say you do get a crazy offer or something that could accelerate your rebuild, and who knows, right? So, like, he's going to listen on every player, and I think that's a good thing for the Flyers. What it also points towards him saying that, though, is that this could be more of a longer rebuild than we're expecting, and that's probably what they might be geared towards. But we'll see, right? Like Briere is mentioning, they're not just going to trade guys for the sake of doing it. It has to actually be value that they're looking for, and the value has to be there. You mentioned that as well, that, you know, we want to trade players for the value that we think that they're worth. So I think that, look for that. If you see trades that the Flyers are making coming up this summer, just look at what they're getting in return. And I think based on that and those returns, you'll kind of have an idea of what the Flyers are gearing towards. But I think it just needs to be value matching the players that are going out for them. And for Hart specifically, if you're trading, you know, a 24-year-old that's looking like a franchise goaltender, that value better be pretty high. The Flyers do trade it.
Absolutely. And I think Briere's where, I mean, I will say this. I got exactly what I expected from Briere. Again, you know, we said it. I expected him to be unassumingly aggressive, just exactly like he is as a player. Look how he shocked everybody by trading early.
Finals trade for me is crazy. Like, when was the last time we saw a trade get made in the Stanley Cup final?
I can't remember, but it had to have happened somewhat in the recent era. But I couldn't recall. You know what I mean? Definitely wasn't in the past few years. But yeah, no, he's done what I expected so far. I'm happy to hear it again. When I first heard the details coming in, I was like, oh my God. I was like, this trade is so bad. And then obviously as everything came in, I'm like, okay, this trade's great. He got exactly, you know, he got the value. I still wanted a higher pick, but he got the extra picks and he got the extra assets out of it. And again, while financially Peterson's a negative, he's not actually a negative. Like, he's not the worst goalie. This guy was
an NHL goalie. He could be a good backup, yeah.
Right, he was an NHL goalie for a while. You can reacclimate him. You could potentially trade him at 50% retained if you need to again.
I just think Martin Jones, everybody thought he was the worst ever. Remember when we first got him, everybody thought, oh, we got Martin Jones. Look how bad he sucked in San Jose. And he was pretty good for the Flyers.
Well, and can you explain to me why Chuck Fletcher did not trade him for a pick? He's like, oh, yeah,
okay, that makes no sense.
Decided to hold on to, dude. Chuck Fletcher was the worst GM. I'm sorry, guys. It's like, he's not like an idiot, but you're just like, why? All these elements, we needed these extra picks. You threw them away.
You know what? I think we heard a lot, like, from you know, a lot of different podcasts and stuff like that. But I remember hearing from Bill Meltzer and Bertidis were talking, saying that, you know, Fletcher was always that type of guy that he'd analyze every potential scenario, and then by the time came to make the deal, it already passed him by. So I think with Briere, you're not getting that overanalyzation. He kind of has a viewpoint. Okay, this is what I want. If I get it, I'm pulling the trigger, and I think that's what you need, right? You need to be aggressive. So
it's crazy to not be that. Like I'm like that right now. Like I have it in my head. That's why until I heard the full details of the trade, I wouldn't have made that trade until I heard, okay, you hit my threshold.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And I feel like you're right. No, I think you're spot on. I think Chuck Fletcher didn't have that. He didn't know what that gauge was. He needed validation from somebody else. It's like, dude, that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I know in my head what I need for each one of the players on this team, on what I would I don't need a computer. I don't need analytics to tell me that. I know what they're worth.
You got to have that gut feeling as a manager. And I just
what they're
think
worth
that,
to this team in this position.
I think as a manager, he just didn't have that killer instinct that you kind of need to make certain deals. Sometimes you have to take a risk.
Yeah, a little bit of it.
A little bit, but I just think he didn't take a lot of risks. Like if you look at all the best trades and the best GMs, usually there's a lot of risk.
Trade was a risk.
That was a risk, but I'm saying there's a lot of I just feel like there's a lot of trades where like risk is incurred where you have to give up something of value to get something back. And Briere kept mentioning that, right? He's like, you know what? To get a first round pick, you have to give up a valuable player. That is Ivan Provorov. You have to make these decisions. You're not just going to give up your garbage and expect to get something good in return. Like if you want something of value, you typically have to give something of value up. I think Fletcher was very hesitant in that. So
I think he just didn't know the values that well.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is what it is.
How did you get nothing for JVR? How could you not move JVR?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It still baffles my mind. I've never seen that. And I know Tortorella was defending him. It's like, dude, come on, man. There's a guy with a great reputation. You couldn't even find a GM for a favor. Take him for nothing. Take him
for a sixth rounder, like
seventh round pick. Just take him. He deserves the opportunity to play in the playoffs. Just let him go. Yeah, couldn't even do that. Like I don't even get it. Like I don't understand the inability.
Well, at least we're out of that Fletcher era now.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say. And it's great that we're not in that era anymore. And that I think has been the great thing of this move is people recognize that now, and that's awesome.
It's kind of turning of the page, I would say, this Provorov trade a little bit.
So I guess who do you think is moving next?
Just on this team in general.
Yeah. Let's ignore the Carter Hart thing. Obviously, that one is we talked that one to death.
I mean, Kevin Hayes, man. I think we've been saying it kind of a while. I think he's probably the next guy to go, and I think this Provorov trade almost not signifies that, but it kind of shows that we're really not looking towards next year at all, and probably not even 2 years from now. And if you're looking at 3 years from now as your real mark, okay, this is the year that we're going to start turning it around and being more competitive again. By that point, Kevin Hayes, what is he right now? He's 30 years old.
I'll say as long as Travis Konechny is on this team, I don't think we're too far. I don't think they're thinking like we're not going to be competitive for the next several years. If they trade Konechny, that's probably
fair enough. I just think with Hayes, like, what's the point of keeping him if you're really not going to be? You're really not going to be making any noise for the next 3 years. Like
he doesn't fit.
All of his best years will be behind him by the time you're starting to contend once again or be in that mix. So it just doesn't make sense for them. So move him if you can, basically.
It's not that we won't get value at him. He doesn't fit here. No. Unless you can be better defensively than Cates, which you can't be. Because even in his best days, he's not as good as Noah Cates defensively. So he's not taking the third line center back, right?
Yeah.
And Scott Lawton's better than him at defense too. So you're not getting that spot back. And what are the odds that Morgan Frost doesn't take a step forward
and take a second line center role? Yeah.
And that he doesn't take that away from you. So you're relegated to maybe a center here, but realistically a winger here, and we don't need you as a winger.
Yeah. And probably a second line $7 million, third line $7 million winger, which you don't really want to be putting that money into.
But there is a team that needs him as a center out there, and I think that's the deal. And after seeing him pull this move off with Provorov, I do trust that you can find that deal out there because that exists, and that might be another three-way deal for a team. You know,
you're gonna have to get creative,
20% or whatever his contract.
Yeah. You're gonna have to get creative. I think for the Flyers and the Hayes trade in general, to trade him, you will have to get creative. And I think seeing what Briere did with this Provorov deal, like you're saying, it gives me more faith in that. Like I would guarantee, well, not guarantee, but I would be pretty surprised if they do make a Hayes trade without a broker. Because my thought is like the Flyers will probably eat like 25% themselves, get a third party team to eat 25% for like either some sort of asset or draft pick. and then you move Hayes away, right? And then you recoup that pick you might have gave for them
Hmm.
to kind of take on that extra cap. So we'll see what happens. I think it's probably Hayes. I mean, Carter Hart's obviously the name out there, but I don't know with that. I have a feeling that the value that the Flyers want for Hart, if they're going to move him, might not be there, and I think teams might be trying to kind of pry him out at a low ball rate. So I just hope that they're careful with that one, because if you move him for a late first and a high and a nice prospect, I just think that's not even close to what you should get back. So
Right. Like it can't be a guy that again, I still put that out there with the Provorov trade. There is no guarantee that we're getting a number one defenseman out of that trade we just made. So
yeah,
everybody should be aware of that. Even the top defenseman available in this draft potentially might be a top pairing guy. It's not that type of year. This is a forward heavy draft. So like
yeah,
we might not even draft a defenseman in the first round. That's speculation. People are making that because the guys available there, the majority of them will be forwards and they will be better than the defensemen available.
yeah.
And the Flyers just traded for a defenseman, right? So it's like there's no guarantee that there's
One
another defenseman coming back in.
one thing I want to actually bring up, Yariv, too, about that Provorov trade that I thought was interesting, and shout out to Bill Meltzer because he tweeted this out. But Helge Grans, the second round prospect that they got from the Kings, he actually played with Emil
Oh
Andre.
yeah, we were gonna talk about that. Please go
Yeah, so
ahead.
he actually played with Emil Andre. So I just thought that was an interesting kind of facet to the deal. I mean, I'm sure some amateur scouts on the Flyers probably knew that and kind of had that in the back of their minds there while they were making the trade. Like, hey, this guy's in the mix and he's already played with somebody that we've drafted and they've had success in the past. So I think that probably factors in as well. That so they played together for the Swedish national junior team, and that team did well in the tournaments that they were
Mm-hmm.
at. Grons is interesting to me. I think that's a really kind of underrated part of the deal, and reason being is I believe he's 6'4" and a right-handed defenseman. So that's, I mean, a premium in the league, obviously. But another thing is you being that size. Like, think of Phil Myers. I think that's kind of a comparison that he was getting. Like when the Flyers first got Phil Myers, what the potential is. I
Yeah.
think obviously it didn't work out, but that's probably what the Flyers are hoping. Like you get a big 6'4" defenseman on the right side who can move the puck and skates well for his size. Like that's a win there. So
Oh,
I think it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds with him for sure.
I can tell you for sure he was on the Flyers' radar. That's why he was included in this. And actually, if you guys go back, even I think this is prior to you showing up here, Vasili, because this would have
Yeah.
been the Emil Andre draft. But I had Steve talk about him, and there was another Swedish defenseman too. There were three guys from Sweden that year. They were all late first round,
Yeah.
high second round pick guys. Emil Andre was one. I will say this with a caveat that Steve did think that Emil Andre was the best of that crop, and the only reason he wasn't taken higher is because of his size.
Yeah.
But
Which
I
we're
like that the
seeing
two,
doesn't matter too much now. So
yeah, and I mean, you look at, I think you're spot on there. I think expect Emil Andre and Grans to play together,
together, yeah.
in the AHL. And we'll see how it works out. Again, I think it's exciting to add another guy of that caliber. And Vasili said it earlier, a lot of the second round picks around the league, you find a lot of gems there of guys who can be,
Especially
second pairing
defensemen.
guys.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry. Yeah. Specifically for defensemen from second pairing to top number one guys. And the reason is because a lot of defensemen have a flawed element to their game. Even the Jacob Slavin, right? Like guys who they typically don't come into the NHL with their entire game figured out. But if they have a really good defensive game and then they figure out the offensive part
Well,
or the two-way part, or vice
usually
versa.
the development path for a defenseman is going to take longer than a forward, and I think that's
Yes.
what it is, right? Like if you're a team in the draft and you're looking for impact, sometimes the defenseman is going to take longer. So then, hence why they drop past certain forwards, because forwards might get into the league a little bit quicker, and the defenseman, it can be a little bit more unpredictable too, right? Like like the NHL is a very hard league to play defense in. It's not very easy, so it's hard sometimes to make the jump from junior and defending, teenagers to defending men, right? That's a big thing. So it'll be interesting for sure. I just thought that was something to bring up, and the
Yep.
fact that they played together.
Yeah, well said. And thank you for bringing that up because actually we should have brought that up earlier. All right. Let's move on to a little bit of news here, and then we'll wrap up with the playoffs. So, news: Ivan Fedotov is finishing up his military service. Apparently in July. Now we had some speculation. I think Russ Cohen came out with the source of that he believes that he would be there for eternity. I didn't really buy that. I don't really buy this either. No
Yeah,
offense
who
to either
knows?
party. I have no idea what's going to happen. Good for him. But from my understanding, we haven't heard anything. If he does come over here, I don't think Carter Hart has anything to do with that. I don't believe that he's coming back. I think it's an interesting thing. I don't expect him back next season. Let's say that.
Yeah,
Where are you
so
with Vasili?
I thought it was an interesting thing to bring up, just the nature of it in general. Obviously
Good
for
to know.
Fedotov, yeah, obviously for Fedotov, I mean that's a good thing for him, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he has the control to potentially be able to go to the NHL and make his dream come true, and that's kind of what he was aiming towards, right? And that got taken away from him this last
Sure.
year. So for him in general, I mean, I just think it's a great story to bring up. But here's the tweet. It's from Hockey News Hub. They do a lot of KHL coverage, so shout out to them with
Okay.
this one. Not a lot of people mentioning where the actual information is coming from, so I just wanted
It's a
to
great
put
point.
that out. But yeah, so what they tweeted Hockey News Hub is that Fedotov and his Navy team are now taking part in the Armed Forces Ice Hockey Championships in St. Petersburg. Participation in that championship will complete Fedotov's military service, and Ivan is expected to be demobilized by the beginning of July. So I just thought that was interesting. That does not necessarily mean that he's going to get back to the
We don't know
NHL
what
at
it
all.
means. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
because he still has that 4-year deal signed with Siska. So like, who knows what's gonna happen there, or whatever deal he has signed with Siska that was kind of
Right.
reported earlier. I just thought, I mean, this being mentioned, it's just interesting timing with all the Carter Hart stuff. I like you're saying, I don't think it's related, but I just think it's an interesting tidbit to add to the mix here. Like if the Flyers do trade Hart, and for some reason now this Fedotov's military service is over and you can sneak him over here, that does, I think, take away some of the risk of it because you add another goalie to the equation who actually isn't a prospect, but is a veteran and
Mhm.
was one of the best goalies in the KHL for seasons, won a gold medal, for Russia at the Olympics. So I think if you add a guy like his talent level to the equation here, I think it makes it a little more manageable. Let's say if the Flyers did trade Hart, right, and if a guy like Urson doesn't turn out and Sandstrom, let's say, only ends up being a backup, you have Fedotov and Kolosov, the Russian goalies, to kind of fall back on. That adds another wrinkle to it.
Mhm.
But personally, I wouldn't expect Fedotov to come over. I still think he's probably going to be in Russia there, but who knows?
Yeah.
This is some interesting info for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see if there's any more info there. And the one thing I was just thinking about as you were talking about, like, man, with the risks of Couturier and Atkinson still out there and not knowing, it does even make more sense to sit back next year just because, like, what if they're not healthy again?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
forget any, again, if there's no Sean Couturier, there's no even bubble playoffs. I'll make it very
They're
clear.
going to be a bottom five team.
But yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Without him, this team can't. Again, I'll stick by my word. Without a number one center, you're fucked.
in
It's
this
just
league.
true.
Yeah,
Now we
exactly.
don't have a number
And
one
now
defenseman
without a
either.
number one defenseman too, they're
And if we
fucked.
trade our
So
number one goalie, we're definitely fucked. And you're talking about, you're going for top pick next year.
yeah.
Um, all right. So our next piece of news here is, and this one's a smaller one. This is also a shout out to Bill Meltzer. So Brian Zanetti has signed in the Swiss League. And this is what Bill reported, that he was not offered an ELC. So prospect Brian Zanetti is off to the Swiss League. Not that surprising. Quite frankly, I don't ever expect him to play for the Flyers. Maybe he'll come over and play for the Phantoms at some point. But I don't think he's going to end up being that type of prospect.
Yeah, and I think too, one thing to mention, right? In that Swiss league, he's playing amongst men and all that, but you got to consider the level of talent versus like the AHL and
Right.
other pro leagues. It's
AHL
going
is
to
a
be a
better league.
Yeah, it's a better league. So that kind of just shows where he might slot in if he ever did come over, and probably as an AHL defenseman. And if you look at the
Mhm.
Flyers' depth on defense and a lot of their younger prospects who are defensemen, I just don't think that he was ever going to be ahead of like the guys that they have right now, right? So
Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Why waste a contract spot if you know that he's probably not going to have a chance for you in the future? So.
Yeah, and obviously bringing over like Smolik at the end of the
Factors in
year,
too.
and
Yeah,
now Gron's coming. It's like okay, yeah.
it's a numbers game, and somebody has to kind of go. So
Yep. So not that surprised. Good luck, Brian Zanetti. Maybe you will change your fate after going to play against men. We'll see if maybe he'll end up here in North America in the future. Next piece of news we have is Tyson Forrester has been named to the AHL top prospects team. Not huge news considering the type of year he had, but not surprising. Not surprising considering the type of year he had. But obviously, just another sign. This guy's most likely on the Flyers next year too. So again, that young talent trickling in, and just a cool story, but shouldn't be surprised. He was one of the best rookies in the league last year, as well as Elliot Denoyer, which is funny that he didn't make it, but Forrester did. I guess that's an age thing, maybe.
yeah, who knows?
I think they're the same age.
It's weird. Yeah, I don't think
I
there's
think they're
too
the
much of
same
a
age. I think it's
difference.
the same
So
draft, actually. So yeah, weird that Denoyer didn't get picked, but Tyson Forrester did. So again, Tyson Forrester, the one with the high ceiling. After the way he played last year, top line winger is definitely
yeah,
a potential in my mind.
I uh,
But we'll see.
I was really high on Forster. Like I wrote an article saying like
He looked
is
so
Tyson
good.
Forster the high end talent the Flyers are looking for? Something along those lines. But I just think he has a skill set that could project him to be a first line winger for sure. I think a lot of people in the past, kind of had him in second line, third line potential area there, and weren't really penciling him in as a first line guy just based on where he was drafted in the 20s. But as we see, right, sometimes you can hit in the 20s, and teams made mistakes before on passing on certain players. And I think with Forster's case, if you look at that shot and just the kind of way he maneuvered when he played with the Flyers in terms of the hockey sense, always being in the right spot. I
Mm-hmm.
think stealing and the potential is
Yeah.
sky high there for him, in my
Looks
opinion.
like minimum at very least he's going to be a third line goal scorer in the league and could potentially be a 40 goal scorer,
Exactly. If he
top
hits in
line
all
player.
areas. Yeah.
Somewhere within that range. We'll see how he is. Again, we like to talk about ranges here because we look at the potential they could hit from the skill set, and then there's always
The
life.
floor, right? So
Yeah, there's always the
exactly.
floor. And again, that does matter. But for us, we're more interested in the ceiling right now. And next piece of news, and this one's a small piece of news, but again, both of our favorite players, so I figured I'd add him on here. But congratulations to Simone Gagne, assistant coach of the Quebec Ramparts, on winning the championship. I don't know, it was just kind of snuck up on me, like I forgot that he was there. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, he was coaching, and
Uh,
that's awesome. It's cool to see him win a championship.
yeah. Congrats to Simone. And I, to be honest, wasn't aware that he was still coaching
Yeah.
there, but it's pretty awesome for him. And I saw something on Twitter that was funny actually surrounding that. And people were saying, hey, like, Briere's the GM, have Gagne come back, 2025 head coach,
Oh
and
my god.
let's get him to do it together, bring the cup like they
I,
should have in 2010, right?
I don't know if I want Gagne to be head coach, but I would love for him to come work for this organization.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
100%.
Definitely.
I think his father might have been a scout when he was drafted. I think he was a scout in the NHL. I don't think he was a scout for the Flyers, but I do remember his father, I think, played in the NHL too or something like that. Anyway, trying to bring shit back from the past. All right. And then our final segment here, which again, we were joking around how we like barely care at this point, especially after the trade recently. Playoff predictions. We were wrong again. We both picked
Florida to win.
we both picked Florida, and Florida right
Hey,
now,
they could come back. You never
they
know.
could, but they're getting their asses kicked in this series a little bit. And yeah, it's like, remember as I was saying it last time, I was like, I'm picking Florida, but I feel like I'm gonna regret this. And
Yeah.
it again, something about Vegas this just shows depth win championships. That's all I have to
It
say.
does. Yeah, depth wins championships and
Matt
also
Sachuk
really
didn't matter. Bob didn't matter.
a really deep back end. Like just look at their defense, right? It's Shea Theodore, Petrangelo. Those guys are basically two number one defensemen on the
They have
same team.
Martinez still, right?
Martinez as
Yeah.
well, who's really good.
Roy,
Um,
Waugh, right? Raw,
Waugh,
Roy.
Nicholas Waugh, and then they
Yeah.
have White Cloud. who's pretty good
Yeah.
on the bottom pair too. So they
And obviously
gotta.
they have 3 scoring lines.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like depth wins championships, and then I mean you have Jack Eichel, who's that 1C for them that they've kind of been looking for because I think he kind of really put them over the top here. Like they had Chandler Stevenson
The
in that role
Yeah,
before.
Eichel is
Um,
the most talked shit about number one center I've
I
seen in
know,
the NHL. I've
literally.
never seen a number one center be talked down to outside of Sean
That
Couturier.
was a
Even though the only reason I know that's happening is because of the injuries. Same thing with Eichel though.
yeah, that was a scary hit, man. I'm happy he's okay. When I saw him
That
get
didn't
hit
look
like that,
good.
yeah, he got hit like that by Chuck, and then he's moving his like arm
Yeah,
weird and his neck weird, and I'm like, oh god, I'm like
yeah.
the disc snapped in half. I was
Uh,
thinking, like, I remember
Poor
watching, and
bastard.
I was watching, and I'm just like, oh man, I hope he comes back. Then he comes back in the third and has a great like setup. Great assist for a goal. So it's good to see that he did not re-injure himself. I will say on that play though, like just the way he took the hit, I didn't think he didn't see Kachuk coming,
No, he
or
fell
else he,
into it. He like
yeah, like
fell forward.
usually you're not gonna fall into a hit. Like most NHL players are not gonna do that. That's like a peewee move. So like he
He
definitely did
lost
not
his
see Kachuk.
footing.
Yeah, he didn't see Kachuk coming at all, and then he saw him in the last second and was like, "Oh fuck!" And it's just like,
Like,
okay,
luckily, I think it's because he put his arms out
yeah.
instead of his head, and I think that's probably why he was
You
shaking his
know,
arm rather than his head.
I'd probably have the same reaction if I didn't see Matthew Kachuk coming, and then I look up and see him barreling towards me, and I'm gonna get decked. So I
Yeah.
can't really
I take out my
play.
pocket knife and be like, "Argh,
I can't really blame. Can't really
better
blame
your
him there.
kidneys than my head."
Literally, but if you look at it, right, first game 5-2 Knights over the Panthers, and then the last game was a 7-2 loss. So it's not looking good right now. Like two blowouts. I will say this is probably I don't know if this is good for Florida, but the last game was on Monday, and the next one is going to be as this airs, as you're all listening to it tomorrow on Thursday. So I don't know if the 3 days off is good for Florida, like we've seen in the past. Like having all the time off has not helped them. I think if it was up to them, they would have loved to get into this series like 2 days after they finished their Eastern Conference final there. I think kind
Mhm.
of having this time because kind of fucked with Bob's mojo and everything like that personally. But I don't know. I think for them, probably the 3 days off might be good just to recoup. Like we just got blown out. And now, hey, they're like, you know what? What's the caveat with playoff series? Until you lose a game on home ice, you haven't, lost the series, or you're not really like in a bad place yet. So technically, they have
Mhm.
not lost on home ice yet. So I hope they make it competitive, man. I'd love to see a competitive final. I feel like a lot of the times in all sports, for some reason, the finals are never that competitive. Like it's usually don't see 6, 7 game series in the NHL in the Stanley Cup final very often, right?
Mhm.
So hopefully we can get to that, but I don't know. It's looking like Vegas might not allow that to happen.
Yeah, and it looks like I mean it's a good chance that Vegas is going to win their first Stanley Cup here after winning the first 2 games.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, Florida has been the comeback team, so we'll see if they can do it. Obviously, everybody's predictions were wrong this year.
Oh yeah.
Vegas would be, they're legit. I mean, no doubt about it. They have the talent up and down. The only hole they had was a goaltender, but Aiden Hill's holding up, so good for them. So we'll see what happens. And again, depth wins championships. And I keep hearing
Vegas
everybody
is a
talk about
clear point of that. Yeah.
young man's game, and what is it, high end talent.
Yeah. I mean,
Seems to be.
Jack Eichel's high in
I
talent.
mean, but it seems to me. I mean, so is Mark Stone. And
Yeah.
Pietrangelo. It's more win by committee.
Also
Veterans
have the
matter.
talent too.
Physicality is huge, and
Yeah.
definitely have talent because you won't be able to separate yourself from the group if you don't have enough of it, as we saw with Seattle. Right,
Yeah.
very
Agreed.
similar to Vegas. Depth, aggression, really good defensive play. They're just not there yet, but people should be very worried about Seattle. This is looking like it's happening again. God damn
Yeah,
it.
man. Just a lot happening, and I mean, this was a fun episode, buddy. I would say, like, I don't think anybody expected the Flyers to make this major of a trade this early in the offseason. I think everybody probably did expect, some moves to be made, but I don't know to this magnitude, right? So I think that's something that's definitely interesting, and
Well,
I wonder if it points to the Flyers having a really busy offseason, right? Because Briere's already underway with the
well,
moves.
100%, dude. And my favorite part is we are no longer looked at as a joke. That's where I agree with everybody about how
Yeah,
exciting this trade is on that level.
it changes
Is
some
that
perception for sure.
is that we went out, we got our value, we got more than people anticipated, right? We
Yeah.
showed, hey, this is not Chuck Fletcher's Flyers anymore. You guys can forget that that ever existed. This
I think it's good.
appropriately is a new era of orange. Thank you,
Yeah,
Danny Briere.
exactly. This is a turn of the page for sure. And I think the trade definitely marks that. Like you were kind of saying, every new regime they want to put their stamp on something in a certain manner. And with Briere making the changes, in the front office to player development stuff like that, and this trade, you're seeing him, say, "Hey, this is how I want to make a stamp on this team, and I want to show everybody that things will be different moving ahead." Right?
I want to see Danny Briere bring in the number 2 pick in this draft. Though
I
I
would
will
love to see that.
I will say this, okay? If the Flyers are really gonna tank and let's say they move TK, I don't think we're still gonna be a bottom 3 team in the league next year, just because of the coach we have and the talent that's developing internally. But this guy Macklin Celebrini, do you know who that is?
No, I do not.
He is, and this is a little. He's 16 years old. He plays in the U.S. Hockey League. He has 86 points in 50 games as a 16-year-old playing for the
Yeah.
Chicago Steel.
Is he
Uh,
like the projected number one for next year right
yes,
now? Oh,
and
okay.
honestly, is also putting up, next level numbers here. There's a guy named Tanner Howe. Again,
I've heard of
remember that.
Hal. I've heard of Hal.
Okay, I don't know if he's related to the Howes. Let's see.
I don't think he is.
I'll look it up because
But I'm
Elite
not
Prospect
100% sure either. So,
Elite Prospect usually tells you. Doesn't look like it.
yeah.
But I will say this about Celebrini. I mean, his numbers. Again, he's the youngest of this group, right? So how I just looked at, he's 17. So let's just. I just want to read out a little bit. So he's 16 right now. He's 5'11", 181 pounds, which is great for a 16-year-old,
Yeah.
right? So he's probably going to be about 6'1", 185, something like that, maybe 6 foot 185. Yeah, this past year he's going to be playing Boston University next year as a 17-year-old, just like
Jesus. I
Fantilli,
didn't. That's
right?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had 46 goals and 40 assists in 50 games in the U.S. Hockey League. In the
Jesus.
World Junior
Man.
Championships, for the 18 program, he had 6 goals and 9 assists in 7 games, plus a lot. In
Holy.
US for his prep team in the US high school hockey prep team, in 52 games he had 50 goals and 67 assists. And as
Jesus.
the under 14-year-old in 50 games he had 51 goals, 90 assists, 141 points. So again,
Oh, man.
for all the love that we have towards Bedard, and again Bedard's still kind of a hair better there, but this is another Fantilli, Michikov level.
Yeah.
They're out there still. And if the Flyers are going to be doing this, do it the right way. Get us 1, 2, 3 of these names, and then we really do see a path forward here. And I
Yeah.
think that's enough to change the entire destiny of this team. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't want to get too
Yeah.
ahead of myself because
And
we have no idea right now.
100%. There's just a lot up in the air. But one thing I do think, and we were kind of unclear about, obviously in the previous weeks, we're not really sure the direction the Flyers are going. But I think now with the Provorov move, it's kind of clear that for sure they're not likely going to be very competitive next season. And I think that they're probably looking towards the future a lot more than we might have thought in the past.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what other moves. But if if the rumors are true that they are exploring, like again, if they move Kevin Hayes, if they move Provorov, if they move other guys,
You move hard, the team's
and,
not looking too
and you're
good.
not, yeah, like Walker and Peterson are not making, you know what I mean? If you
Much of a
see more of those
difference.
moves, you know that next year is going to be rebuilding year. The one aspect I do say is don't underestimate John Tortorella's ability to turn players' careers around, because I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if the Flyers are looking at that and going, well, if we turn Peterson around, we could trade him for an asset. If we get more out of Walker because we're playing him more than LA is,
We can
we can
trade
get
him.
some,
Yeah.
you never know. He's only going to be
I would
28
say
years old.
that, and I'd also say like look at all the young guys that excelled under Torts this year. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple guys they graduate this year also excel under him, and the young guys that excelled this past year continue to do that.
Yeah.
It's all wait and see, but I think there's a lot of it seems like there's a lot of fostering young player development here right now, and it seems like they're in a good place culture wise. A random thing I didn't bring up actually that I want to mention too is Sean Walker and Morgan Frost actually skate together in the summer.
Right.
Jeff Merrick mentioned
I
that, so I
did
thought
hear
that
that.
was that was interesting as well. And then final piece of news, or not really news, but we were talking about Vegas and like how, oh, it's not a young man's game. It's typically veterans and your physicality, and then you add the high end players on, and then that's where you get to where Vegas is at. So the average age of the Golden Knights is 27. So that's prime range. Their youngest player playing right now that's been playing in the playoffs for them is Nicholas Hague, and he's only 24. So it just shows, right? Like, you don't got 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Typically, those guys aren't moving the needle for you in the postseason.
Typically
but
not.
they can in the future, but usually, like I said, it's all a development process.
Yeah.
The Flyers are in that development process as we are kind of speaking right now. So
yeah, and we'll see. And actually, I was just thinking of something as you were talking too. I'm like, I did see Perot from the USNTDP ranked at somewhere around the 20th range. It would be crazy if the Flyers ended up drafting Leonard and Perot, and then they had Leonard, Perot, and Cutter Gauthier all at the same program together, and then potentially all coming at once the following year.
Hey, man, that's a great way to build chemistry between some of your young prospects. I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't be against it.
Can't see it happening, but it would be cool.
Definitely, I think for sure that with that 7, if they keep it, they're going forward. And then with that 22, they'll likely go defense. That's my
if one of the top guys are available, I think they would go defense.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think if it's not one of the top guys, I don't think they're going to go, because there are going to be too many good forwards.
The stacked forward class
available,
yep.
And it's a much more of a Jeff Carter, Mike Richards type of year.
Another guy I would watch too is, like, I don't know if he's going to drop this far, man, but Andrew Cristal, for some reason, I
saw him ranked in the 20s.
I don't know why everybody hates this kid, but like, they don't hate him. There's just a lot of
he just has a flaw, probably some kind of significant.
Yeah, what it is that, like, he's all offense, no defense. But like, you pick a guy that's getting 100 points a year, and let's say he reaches that potential at the NHL level, hypothetically, I don't really care about the defense. And if you got him at 22 overall, it's a steal. So
that's the type of guy. Yeah, like I said, that's typically what you get in the later end of the first round. You take a guy who's missing an element, right? The top of the draft for your guarantees. And the number 7 does guarantee us at a good to great player. So hopefully we land on the great to exceptional range. Cool. Anything else you want to add? We'll wrap it up here.
No, great episode, my friend. I hope everybody enjoys listening, and hopefully we have even more Flyers news to dissect as the weeks go along, and keep it as interesting as this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully we have some more good news coming. Hopefully if the Flyers do move on from Carter Hart, it's a win. Again, I'm not excited for it. Vasili's not excited for it, but we have to be rational always. I've seen all of my favorite players leave.
Yeah,
so
exactly
if you're younger and you're not used to that, get used to it. That's part of sports.
That's sports, exactly.
The key is that when you make those moves, they're the right move. That's it. That's all you can really ask for, is you don't lose these trades, you win them. Yeah. And so far, Danny Briere is a damn good start.
Exactly. So far, so good. I don't think we could have asked for a better first trade to see from him in terms of getting, the right value for a player you're giving up, who's also was an integral part of the team. So
yes. And I expect more of it. I want to see more to really make this trade worth it.
Just to end the episode, man, shout out Ivan Provorov. Like, played 7 seasons for the Flyers, gave his all. And I think a lot of the time wasn't appreciated much by the fan base, even though he really, tried his hardest for the team.
And I think
was put in some bad situations. So
yeah, and I think for those who don't want to believe that that's true, I brought this up over and over again, that when Claude Giroux was inevitably gone, people would notice. Look at the play driving when Claude Giroux disappeared. It disappeared. So expect that guy that you don't think is a top pairing guy, you will see the effects of that this year when you're putting guys who clearly aren't slotted for that position in a higher
or
spot.
Just might not be ready. Like, there's a lot of young guys. I think
it's going to be Sanheim, dude.
Yeah, one thing actually we didn't really mention with the Provorov stuff, and I guess we could just end it off and mention it, is that I thought it was funny, but like, you have York, you have these young guys. I mean, the whole thing was, you put Provorov on an island by himself all those years, and look what it did to his development.
Doing it again.
You're kind of doing it again with some of the young guys here, but
that's why it's going to be Sanheim. And
exactly. I think they're going to ration it out a bit different than what they've done in the past.
I mean, right now on paper, the only top pairing you can put together is Sanheim,
Risto.
Risto. And that's not a top pairing for those
It's
who
a
are
second
aware.
pairing.
Yeah, it's a second pairing in the NHL. You'll mix in York with a guy. Maybe will be York and Ristline. It could happen. I'm not saying it can't happen. I mean, maybe in their mind that's what they will, but you're not paying Sanheim all that money, and you didn't pick him over, because they could have moved Sanheim too. They didn't move him. And if you guys don't think he had value, that's kind of a joke. Look at what Provorov got back. Just he wouldn't have had that kind of value. He's not as good as Provorov. Okay, let's wrap it up there. Again, thank you everybody for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow us both on Twitter. I'm Wolok. Vasili is Flyer It Up on Twitter. Please make sure to follow us. Again, like, subscribe, share, comment, downvote, upvote, do whatever you got to do. It's a humongous help for us. Hit the bell as well if you want to be notified in the middle of the night when these come out. And again, we're going to keep going through the season. Continue to get excited, and again, humbly, thank you all so much. It's been 3 weeks in a row now, consistent, and we're trying to top it. And you guys are awesome. And again, welcome everybody who's listening. We could not be happier, and we'll keep trying to evolve and improve the show as we move forward. Vasili, anything you want to add before we end?
No, just excited, to keep recording over the off season here, and we should have some great stuff coming up with the draft. So it's gonna be fun.
Oh, dude, it's getting so close. 2.5 weeks away.
Awesome, man.
All right, thank you again, everybody. We love you, and remember, always stay